You'd put in your CRM, but then you go, okay, well, I'm looking at this process. Of this process, this is the biggest pain point. Can we automate that piece?
Hi, I'm Khyati Pal, and this is all about CRM. On this episode, we're going to be focusing on recruitment sales, the difference between an ATS and a CRM, data, AI, and automation. From email campaigns to SEO, my favorite topic, all things CRM. We've got Jamie Hart with us, David Connolly, Neil Curry, Stuart Johnson, Mike Watman. Welcome, Christy.
Would I spend £50 to go to this conversation?
No.
No. And until the answer is yes, then change them.
Exactly.
I know marketing isn't able to be measured. I was like, excuse me? Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most measurable.
Someone described to me once that recruiters spend their place in two zones, the finding zone and the filling zone.
Yes.
And the trick is to spend more time, as much time as possible in the filling zone, because that's where the money is.
3 pieces of advice you would give to anyone starting their journey, currently shopping for, let's just say, maybe even a new CRM.
To find out.
Today on All About CRM, we are going to be discussing the topics that are on the top of mind for everyone, AI and automation. It seems like every time you talk about any kind of digital transformation, you cannot talk about AI and automation. Our guest today has had 20 years experience in the tech world, working across finance, HR, and recruitment. He has been heavily involved in all things CRM. Please welcome Neil Curry from Target Recruit.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very well. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Now, as I mentioned, we are talking about AI and automation, but I feel like every time I do bring up any kind of, AI-related workflows or automation, people seem to get quite confused about where perhaps automation ends and AI begins, or perhaps like just the fundamental differences between the two. For example, there are times when people might suggest that something that's automated, which is if this, then that, is perhaps AI. Let's face it, it's not. So before we sort of get into the nitty-gritty of things, can we just talk about the fundamental differences for those who don't understand between automation and AI?
Automation is more of if this, then that. So it's more of a linear instruction to technology, whereas AI is more of the human-like interaction that you would expect to see. So let me give you an example. If you've been on any website and you've interacted with a chatbot, if you go to the chatbot and it says, are you an existing customer? Yes or no. Are you interested in broadband, Sky TV? You click on one. Do you have a fault with your service? Do you want to speak to sales? That's automation. AI is welcome to Sky. How can I help you today? So you're interacting. It's more of an interactive conversation which could go off in any direction, whereas automation is a lot more linear and straightforward.
And structured.
It doesn't think outside the box. It's a set of rules. AI isn't.
That's really good. I think that's a very good explanation. Simple. So thinking about automation then, because I feel like before we move on to AI, which is obviously a more sophisticated technology, but also the work involved in implementing AI on proprietary data requires more effort. But let's start with perhaps automation and processes. There is enough evidence and enough research around how much efficiencies businesses stand to realize should they automate some of the mundane admin recurring high volume tasks. Thinking about recruitment and thinking about perhaps the use of CRM, and if they are to use the CRM for not both, but like across their business operations, sales, marketing, and customer service. What are some of the key tasks you think or you've seen that have delivered success, but through automation?
Yeah, I think automation and data have really come to the forefront of conversation because of AI. Yes, automation and data have been around for decades, so has AI, but the actual conversation around it, when people have been looking at AI, everyone's been talking about data. So they thought, okay, well, before jumping into the deep end with AI, we actually need to get our house in order with automation and with data. I guess on the automation front is, first of all, to highlight in your business where you may have tasks which can be automated is either one where there's a manual process, so people are jumping in, or if you're using workarounds outside of the very technology which is meant to be automated. So we see it all the time. We go in, we assess what a customer's using on their CRM front. We can easily identify where the easy fixes are around automation when they're not using their core CRM.
Okay.
And when you've got users or teams diverting away from their own technology. So, I mean, there's so many examples of how you can automate processes. It could be recognizing an application online via LinkedIn, which just has an automated email as a response. I mean, some businesses don't even do that. So again, you're not building up a great employer brand. Other examples would be, let's have a think, where could we do automation? Anything, compliance is a big one as well.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely, mine's going everywhere here, but automation, compliance is a big one. So when you've got date fields, which, you know, you've got an expiry date on a check, you need your team and you need the candidates to be aware when that's coming up, 90, 60, 30, 15, 5 days, 1 day, up to the point where it's actually expired. You can use automation to do an awful lot of that heavy lifting before you actually get to the point.
Absolutely.
And again, the amount of businesses that we speak to who have actually got people on site who aren't compliant because they can't physically keep on top of it because it's all being managed outside of the CRM on an Excel spreadsheet.
That surprises me, especially, I think that's a great example of people getting a system such as a CRM, which enables businesses to utilize, you know, its features for a lot of their business operations, but then still only using it for perhaps like 20% of the activity that the business does. Compliance for me is a big one because with automation, specifically, like you mentioned, the dates, but also digital like ID triggers, like, you know, ID check triggers. You can basically build that based on certain criteria. 30 days before expiry, send an email with this link so that it's up to date. And then you just get a notification. You don't have to like manually go through your Excel spreadsheet, see who's coming up for, who's due for, you know, a renewal. Do that. DBS checks is another one. And all of those things can be easily integrated into the compliance module of your CRM and, you know, making the life of everyone really easy, especially consultants in a contractor setting, because they will know where everyone's at with their checks and there's not this constant back and forth and frustration between them and the compliance department.
Yeah. It's a huge one.
It is.
And there are teams, we sit down, there's teams who are doing it all manually.
Yeah.
And there is literally systems out there which can do the automation for you. And then there's also AI out there which can do the document reading to see whether the right documentation has been provided. If it has, you can then mark that candidate as compliant on that particular check. You've never had to have an individual being involved in that process.
Line by line.
Line by line. And I think the reason why a lot of businesses find themselves in that situation is either one, they didn't set their system up properly in the first place. Two, it can't actually carry out that functionality. Or three, their business has adapted, but they haven't adapted their tech around it.
That is true. I think that's one lesson that I think everyone should hopefully learn or go into your CRM with is CRM is not set and forget. It has to constantly evolve and be optimized to make sure that your business is using it and it is working for your business to deliver the services that you want to deliver.
Yeah, I agree.
Personalization is another thing. So, you know, talking about compliance checks on candidates, but also like the whole experience of a candidate. This is where automation comes in, but also automation and human design perhaps comes in, because you've got the candidates that come in through, I don't know, different sources into your system when you post a job or if you manually put them in, you know, whatever source they originate from. And the type of journey you dictate they will go through utilizing your system has an impact on your brand, your retention, especially if you're in a contract recruitment environment moving forward. How do you see that evolving? Because I think I spoke to somebody else about this as well, that personalization, candidate experience and personalization was a thing that was being talked about a lot in the last, I'd say like 2 years, especially like post-COVID, the boom that we saw. It's kind of died down. And there's a lot of emphasis on productivity around automation, you know, candidate screening or, you know, job to candidate matching, you know, your AI coming into play there, just analysis of large volumes of data, really. How do you see automation and AI moving forward together to bring about a simpler experience for candidates?
Yeah, so I think depending on what type of recruitment you run, the level of AI and automation involved will differ. So if we take a prime example of high volume temp space, quite often candidates, not all the time, but quite often candidates aren't actually getting a very personal experience in the first place. So They'll be going through a long-winded application form online. They'll then get no recognition that they've applied. They then might get a rush telephone interview. After that, they might then just have sole communication with that recruitment company the rest of time that they're on those books. It'll be email, it'll be WhatsApp, it'll be SMS. So if anything, the introduction of AI can actually, quite ironically, improve the personalization of that journey. So you can actually, so when people are interacting online, it can be through a chatbot. You can have AI interviews. You can have all of the relevant communication around the compliance and availability done with AI tools as well. So you're giving the candidates, with the use of technology, more of a personal experience, albeit with technology underpinning it all. It's not to say that a human has to step away from that process, but with the involvement of AI, it'll actually reduce the workload of the consultants who are rushed off their feet in the first place, and allow them to concentrate on, I guess, further activities within the organisation, and let AI and automation do the heavy lifting. I think we won't necessarily see that come into the likes of exec search or certain perm spaces just yet. We will see it in contract. When there's high volume, you want technology to be doing that heavy lifting.
Absolutely.
You know, AI, you do your job post, you then get a whole load of applications. AI can then screen the CVs. It can identify the ones which are suitable, the ones which aren't, the ones which are suitable. It forwards them on to the relevant hiring manager. It'll then highlight why it thinks that those applicants are suitable to be taken forward, and then you can then have the consultant step in. But actually going through droves of CV with a fine-tooth comb with your own eyes to see who's suitable or not, you're going to miss things.
Absolutely.
Just let the technology do what you're looking for, and then allow yourself to be more interactive with those candidates. I think we'll see that more of that experience in that contract and perm space, but definitely so on the temp side, contract, and I think probably less so on perm and exec.
You know, what you've just mentioned about the whole experience thing and how we will see it evolve perhaps, or contract market leading it with perhaps like permanent and exec search, maybe not following in the exact same footsteps, but like finding their own method to communicate and screen. Talking about design, because I feel like all of this has to be this thought that needs to be put into it, right? So it's not like just take it off the shelf and this is how it works, because the technology exists. We all know it exists. You know, various platforms have shown us how it will work in a perfect environment, in a perfect scenario. But businesses are not perfect. Every day is not perfect. Your own business case nuances, you know, come into play. How important do you think is that businesses invest internally in either a team or a person or that kind of skill set to be able to design automations and the use of AI so that it's fit for purpose for their businesses? Because one size does not fit all. Even if the scenario is more or less same, there are going to be little nuances. And when you want to maximize the AI or automation capabilities, you want it to be fit for purpose.
Yes. So I think it depends on the company, and the more complexities and considerations a company has, the more there should be on an emphasis for an individual or team to be looking after that part within their organization. So for example, if you're a good size, you've got a lot of consultants, you're across different regions, you've got multiple brands, you're running different lines of recruitment as well, so temp, contract, perm. All of those have to be looked at in isolation, but also to be viewed at the bigger picture about what the business objectives are.
Absolutely.
That, for a lot of businesses, is only really reviewed when you look to replace existing systems and put a new one in. That's really when people come and sit down and say, okay, what do we want? After that, for a lot of businesses, it tends to be forgotten about. But those organizations who do a good job is they keep on top of it. They work very closely with their technology partner. They have somebody in-house or people in-house who are upskilled, who can be reactive around the business changes to then adapt the technology around what the business needs rather than just sitting stagnant. Before you know it, you're then using the adoption rate of the software drops. People are using workarounds. You're just back in the same position as you were when you put the replacement system in. Exactly. So you have to keep it at the forefront of what you're doing. I think in the conversation around AI is a lot of different considerations you need to make when you're looking at putting in new technology, AI or otherwise. But if you boil it down to three main things that I see most businesses do when they do most successfully is, first of all, if we take AI, is the awareness. So it's actually understanding what technology is out there on the AI front. You can do that in a load of different ways. And I think people are, at the minute, that they're intrigued, but they're not very active about putting stuff in. So they're just waiting to see what other people do. You need to speak with your existing tech partner. See, well, that's one of the easiest routes. If you've got technology already in place, start with them, understand what they've got on the AI front. And then second of all is then start to tie or start to look at your business objectives and then where technology can step in. So say, for example, you want to build your client base. You want to land more clients, more jobs, but your BD team isn't necessarily doing it on a comprehensive basis. So you want to increase your outreach. Part of the outreach could be outbound calling. You don't have any telephony system which allows people to monitor, train, look at sentiment, look at keywords. There's technology literally out there which does that. It provides the information and your managers can see where there could be training needs, where people are doing well, where people need to improve. I think once you've then got that, you've got the awareness, you've got the objectives, you know where technology can either address gaps or fulfill an objective, is then to put a plan in place. Just when you have to do the selections, when you have to do the deployment, it's where you have to do the rollout and the maintenance from there.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned telephony because I feel like that's just kind of boomed as well, the whole AI capability for summarizing, spotting sentiment, keywords, even triggering events through what was discussed. However, I've also noticed people then start to look at just telephony in isolation and not really in the context of what is the overall objective. And I have actually noticed people again reacting to this obviously being a trend, but important for the business, but not quite understanding what objective or what purpose will it serve overall. And therefore, there are no necessary KPIs set around it to then understand what kind of impact it's having. Because let's just face it, again, to your point, if you just monitor calls and if you just say, oh, that's what is happening per consultant, maybe you're like, oh, this is the standard sentiment. And then you don't know what to do with that information or how it feeds into your objectives because either you don't have one or it's not linked to the data that's coming out of telephony, this particular feature. Then I feel like it's all you're setting yourself up for failure and you're actually not misusing, perhaps is not the right word. You're actually just making a bad business decision because you are investing in a technology that's capable of so much more, but you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, so it always has to be tied back to that business objective. And I agree, you're just going round in circles if you don't know necessarily what you're trying to achieve from it. And quite often, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve from it, getting internal sign-off and buy-in, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. We see so many projects where, you know, the intent to do something is there, but the business buy-in and approval is not. So projects just don't get off the ground. So if you are looking at, you know, that example of building up your BD, you need people to be doing more outbound. You need to make sure that the calls are of a good quality and that people are delivering on what you expect. Then, you know, is telephony the right way? There are other options as well, but if you're doing it where you can do remote call monitoring, you've then got the coaching behind it as well, and the software is actually leading you to where improvements can be. That's taking a big box if that's one of the objectives of the business, but you need to tie that back continually back to the business case about why you put it there in the first place. And that just doesn't just fall on the key stakeholders who have chosen and implemented the software. It's down to all of the users as well. The reason being is that you want your data to be in a good quality and a usable way. If you don't communicate why technology is important to your business to everybody who's touching it, then you'll find that it can soon go off the tracks in regards to the quality of the data which actually goes in the first place. Some people won't record their calls. They'll stop a call record. They'll not listen to people when they're receiving feedback. They'll not believe what the technology is telling them. But if you continually tie it back to that business objective, you get buy-in and it should deliver what you want if you've chosen the right platform.
And, you know, like talking about activity, which is calls, all activity creates a profile of the customer that is recorded against. And your CRM is your perfect, platform to map your activity, existing data, their contact information, client title, the organization hierarchy, and all of your historical data. Where do you see automation helping with perhaps current data, like new data, but also maybe legacy data, because people are thinking, again, back to your point about data becoming like quite important because they know that AI, data, automation kind of work together. But even if they have certain measures in place or they've structured or designed certain workflows concerning data moving forward, legacy data is still very important for any kind of, predictive modeling that AI is capable of, or for large volumes of data analysis. So you understand, where you're at. That legacy data is in really poor quality. There is obviously attachment to data that's like 10 years old, which I've like talked about lots. So just let it go. Placements are fine, but like candidate data or client data, 10 years ago, it's no longer relevant. So just let it go. But people don't tend to make those decisions quickly, but also efficiently. So legacy data will continue to be a bit of a problem quite a big problem, in my opinion, for any kind of data analysis or leveraging AI to do data analysis to give them, your descriptive, predictive, prescriptive analytics. Do you see any automation workflows that recruitment agencies can perhaps implement to flag certain discrepancies or data quality or cleanliness for legacy data that they could follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the minute it tends to be quite a manual process. People are doing audits of their data to make sure that what information's been recorded is what's required. And it could be something as simple as, do you have the right information in the right field, in the right format? It tends to be more reactive rather than something which people do on a regular basis. I know when I've worked in sales teams before, which come to mind is you do your forecast Monday morning in front of the whole sales team, and this one in question, 20, 25 people in the room. The CEO would come into the room with his laptop, you'd have Salesforce open, you'd be talking about a deal, and then he'd be going through Salesforce and actually looking to make sure that what you've said is present and correct within the CRM. And if it wasn't, you'd get pulled up on it.
That's good.
So you were held accountable, and you had pride in your work, knowing that Monday morning was coming, that you had to make sure that everything was in good form. So that's one like practical example where people can make sure that the data is right. You can also be more prescriptive with, the technology now just allows you to have control over what information gets recorded, like mandatory fields, what format you can record data in. So you're essentially just forcing people to capture that information. But it can, just going back to my previous point, that can cause frustration because you think, well, why am I doing this? You need to educate your users as to why you're asking them to do it. It might feel like an onerous task, but if it's actually linking back to the objective of the business and why you've put that technology in place, if you communicate it, then the onerous task will still have meaning behind it. If that ask is then no longer relevant because that data doesn't need to be recorded, then just stop asking people to do it.
Exactly. It's
but if you
frustrating.
educate people, but you don't just educate people from the initial phases, you have to continually educate them, bring them back into line when it's not being recorded. You might as well find that there's certain needs for training. People don't know how to capture the information. It could be cultural, it could be an individual, it could be a team where they're just like, we're not going to bother doing it. We're just going to go to path of least resistance, and we're not going to capture it.
Doing things. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's tools now as well which can look at the data, it can validate it, it can understand it if it's right, if it's relevant, and AI tools can do that, sit over your data set and then interrogate the data for you. So you don't have to be reactive. You don't have to have, say, an operations director who's keeping on top of that. Technology can do, again, that heavy lifting for you and investigate your data, whether it be present or that legacy as well. And some practical examples of how to keep on top of it. But it comes back to education. You have to tell people why you're asking them to do stuff. Because once you know why to do it, you can then start to take pride in your work to capture it.
That's true. I think with legacy data, you could also run simple programs to at least flag duplicates, because I find that
duplicates is a big one.
Exactly. And it's such a simple thing, and it just seems like people don't think about it, and it's that's something that can be done without you having to manually check the data, isn't it? That's just if it's the same name, same email, just
or simple exercise of, you've got a duplicate checker, it flags up, the person who just ignores it and goes on and creates the record because it's probably easier, or they want to create their account in their own name and run with it rather than it going back to the original owner. You can easily keep on top of that. So you would then have automation to notify the person who's responsible for the data to say, okay, well, why did you go to create that account when it was already existing? So that's that's a perfect example of automation of keeping on top of it.
That's so true. And I think it's also a great example
I'm
of...
saying that because I've done that myself plenty of times.
You did it. You're like, I don't care whose account it is. I'm just creating a new one. Before you know it, it's like, Neil, you did this.
Yeah.
Shit. But it's a culture thing as well, because if there are duplicates and if you're going ahead and doing it anyway, and if no one pulls you on it, or like no one flags it, then you're just like, you've got free reins to continue with bad quality data. So you do have to have like almost like internal checks and balances, but also in addition to education, accountability. Be like, your example of Monday morning meetings, you are going to be actually, asked about what's going on. If it's not in the system, it doesn't exist in a way.
You're right saying about the cultural thing there, because I've gone from companies where I've been using Salesforce, world's number one CRM. I would say that. But I've gone from using Salesforce and then going to another company where it wasn't Salesforce, and you're like, this CRM is terrible. How can I get out of it? How can I use it as little as possible?
Fair.
So that can be a cultural thing where you have to listen to your users, because they, typically the people who are moving around jobs now are doing it much more frequently than they ever have. So they're
That's
getting
so
exposed
true.
to so much more technology than they ever have.
Yeah.
And they know what's good and what's not good in the market.
Yeah,
if you're getting
absolutely.
complaints from people, or you're not getting complaints and people aren't using it properly, that can be a telltale that the tech just isn't right in the first place.
yeah.
Then you shouldn't necessarily be stubborn and dig your heels in and say, okay, well, no, we've asked our users to use it, so they have to use it. If it's not being adopted, you having to change it so that the users actually have have a better experience when they're interacting with it.
So the design is really important, isn't it? The design, it's almost like the design has to be logical for the user. So it's almost like, okay, I can see the information that I'm being required to put in and the steps. And therefore, it's almost like the whole concept of the path of least resistance. So I think your workflows have to mirror that sentiment, that how can I simplify it as much as possible so that I get the information I need at a business level or at a team level, and they're encouraged.
But it needs explanation. It needs education.
Oh God, yes,
so if you're putting that a new process in place, you need to sit down with your team and include them. You need to say, okay, this is the idea. Does anybody have any thoughts? If they do, listen to them. If they don't, fine. But say, okay, this is what we're going to be putting in, and this is the reason why. So just constantly educate them.
Yeah.
Don't try and do stuff behind their back. You just need to be transparent about it.
Yeah, it's strange because I feel like all the conversations I have around it, it all just ties back to what do you want to achieve? What are the objectives? And I feel like once you clarify that, whether you break it down, or whether they are like simple processes, everyday little processes, or they're like broad level business strategy objectives, if you're not communicating enough and if you're not educating and if there's no accountability, things will fail. Even if perhaps, at the time of a new CRM implementation, the adoption's high purely because you've put a lot of effort around the implementation. You've done the training sessions, you've recorded things, there's like quick, cheat sheets and whatnot. But I think 4 months or 5 months down the line, it kind of just, loses its momentum sometimes if you're not on top of it. And if you don't have those checks and balances in place. With AI, again, what are your thoughts on how consultants at an individual level will interact with, say, your CRM to do the tasks that they probably hate doing? Like, what do you think would be the evolution? Because at the moment, of course, you can have dashboards, which is like almost like a data analysis in real time, telling you what's going on, what you're likely to do, could do a pipeline as well as like forecasting for you and show you your activity in real time. But that's still quite, you're clicking, you're writing, you're typing things in, you're querying the data and whatnot. How do you see that evolving? Because I feel like, for me, seems to be the way that it may go down. Do you see that happening? Like voice commands and just interacting or conversing with AI?
Yeah, I think it'll come in. I think that's a big change in work and practice, though, to be talking to your computer. And quite often, if you are writing stuff, I personally find that if I'm writing something down, making sense of it as I write.
Yeah.
So if I'm on a call and I'm on a consultation call with a customer, I'll be writing down literally everything that comes out of their mouth. Yes, I do use Gong, which transcribes the call, but I'm actually physically writing it down, so I'm understanding their scenario a lot better by almost imprinting it in my mind as to what their challenges are, what they want to achieve, and whether or not we would be a good fit. I think for users, with AI, it's going to be making them initially an awful lot more streamlined than they are at the minute. People are using ChatGPT. People, are using it to like summarize a document. They can be using it to fine tune an email. So people are using it already, I guess, incorporated from the CRM. It's just going to, again, just make things more streamlined. It's going to summarize a CV. It's going to write an email to a client with the CV summarized before a consultant needs to do that themselves. And it's going to bridge that gap between your experienced staff and your non-experienced staff. So that should bridge the gap. It should increase productivity as well, so people aren't having to wait months, if not years, for that intuition and experience to be able to do the job well in the first place. I think if you use dashboards as an example, you look at your data every single day. It depends what sort of role you're in, but predictive analysis is coming. It's certainly coming in our technology where you've got that analysis which is being pushed through to a user without them asking for it. But because it's looking at the historical data, it's actually identifying trends which people need to be aware of now rather than before something goes wrong.
Yes.
The other one as well is like this digital assistant, which again, we're rolling out in our technology thanks to Salesforce, where you complete a task, it then prompts the user what they should probably do next. So rather than shouting across the office or working from home and putting a message into Slack or picking the phone up or doing what you think's right and getting it wrong, the digital assistant is driving the behaviour of individuals, again, bridging the gap between your non-experienced and your experienced employees. So that, again, should make them more productive and upskilled better.
My only concern there is, again, at an individual level, you interact with AI in whatever capacity. I'm a voice person, so obviously I'm like, I will fully take up voice. But at an individual level, as they interact with AI and they, your co-pilot, your co-assistant, or whatever you want to call it, gives you the next best step, it still has to be found in something, because otherwise we all will have different ways of doing things at an individual level, right? And I think that's where the business objectives and the business design and certain, almost like either certain prompts or certain configuration of your system is required, because otherwise I think it might lead to individual ways of doing things with lack of clarity around what constitutes as a process, because people might be like, oh, well, this is how I do it. And then the other person might be like, oh, well, this is how I do it because my chat agent, my agent or my co-pilot said that to me, was like, this is the next best step, especially when they are inexperienced and they're just coming in. So I still feel like there will need to be some kind of governance, like at a company level, that will need to be fed into the system so that your AI is trained to reflect your company requirements.
And that's there.
Yeah.
That's there.
It is. Okay.
Now, if you use, for example, Einstein with Salesforce, that's the virtual assistants, predictive analysis, which I've mentioned. That can be trained around, that's trained on large language models.
Yes.
But you can then, what we're doing with Target Recruiters, then we have our own functionality which sits on top of it.
Okay.
So Salesforce isn't specific to the recruitment world.
No.
Target Recruit is.
Okay.
So our own technology is specific to recruiters. And you will be able to adapt the AI functionality around how you want your business to behave and perform. So it's not going to be completely set in stone where it's being decided by a big data center where it's churning through billions of data points. It's all it will come back to the user and what's being asked of them based on what the company has required. But that is based on the right tech, of course.
And data, proprietary data.
Data and tech.
Proprietary data is so important. 3 pieces of advice you would give to anyone starting their journey, currently shopping for, let's just say, maybe even a new CRM, or looking at optimizing their CRM and shopping for things or features that kind of give them AI capabilities and maybe automation capabilities. What are the 3 things, your advice to anyone probably listening to this and interested in automation and AI?
To find out what's out there. Speak to your network. They'll be experiencing so much more. And if you're part of a strong network or you're part of a networking group, you can get an awful lot of good advice from those guys of what they like, what they didn't like. Don't take it perhaps as gospel, but you can get pointed in the right direction and learn from yourself. Be inquisitive, go online, see what tools are out there. Use the AI tools, type in what are the 5 best telephony systems with AI for recruiters, and it will give you 5 of the top
ones,
which it recommends. Yeah, it's looking at other sources online, but at least it's giving you a start for 10. And then I would say speak to your own suppliers, speak to your own technology providers. Anybody right now should have put their own AI functionality into whatever tech that you using, at the very least, it should be on their roadmaps. You need to understand what that is, and also what they're talking about ties into what you're wanting to achieve as a business.
Exactly.
But I think you need to be inquisitive. A lot of people have experienced, knowingly or not, AI in their own personal life, shouting at Alexa, interacting with a chatbot, getting recommendations on Netflix. That's all AI.
A lot of consumer experience is
for years,
sophisticated.
for years and
Exactly.
years they have. Now it's come into their day-to-day lives at work. People are getting a bit nervous, but they shouldn't. I mean, you know,
agree.
everyone's talking about it. Just look at us. We're talking about it now.
Yeah.
If you don't get on board, then you get left behind. It's not to say you can't catch up, but why wouldn't you want to be ahead of the next biggest thing in tech by a long shot?
It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. It's just going to get bigger and better. It really is. Just get on top of it and get involved.
I think for me, it's definitely define your business objectives, and to your point, educate yourself. Like, be curious, educate yourself, and understand what you want to achieve from whatever it is that you want to invest in. But also think about it in long term, because sometimes I think you can have like very quick, you know, maybe this is a problem now, so perhaps this is my objective now, and I'm just going to buy something because it fixes my problem now, without enough thought given to how will it look in 2 years' time? What will it look, even 12 months' time, you know, or what will it look like if I were to grow or not grow? Like, all of those things need to be considered when investing in tech, because it is expensive. It's not like a cheap thing that you just buy and, you know, set and forget, and it's like a minuscule business expense that you don't even have to worry about. My final question, because this is something that, you know, is brought up all the time. Well, I have my thoughts on it, but there's a huge narrative going around about, AI will not replace relationships. Now, I'm very big, who said AI was going to replace relationships? But there's like countless articles that I read, and even like LinkedIn posts about how AI is like not fit for purpose, cannot replace relationships. It's almost like it's AI or nothing. Like, either I want AI to be able to do everything or nothing, and AI will not be able to take my job or my relationships. And it's like, first, I don't understand where it started from. But what are your thoughts on it? Because as we've both established in this episode, it's here to stay. I don't think it is going to replace relationships. But where do you think it stems from, and what are your opinions and thoughts on it?
I think it's because people are talking about the potential of what AI can do in the future. So that's super intelligence AI, which let's say will potentially replace jobs, and it will. Of course, it will.
Certain jobs, it will. Yes.
It will.
And you know what? Maybe those certain jobs, and it might be harsh, but I feel like those certain jobs, if they are like highly mundane, admin, you know, related jobs that are not necessarily making the person better, giving them satisfaction, or like helping them become better, then maybe that's in some aspects a good thing, because hopefully this will open, you know, I think I read somewhere, World Economic Forum, I think, where it said 29% of the jobs that exist now will just no longer exist. However, it also mentioned like 69 million jobs will be created. It's like the same thought process when the Industrial Revolution happened. Everyone was like so worried, and internet happened and everyone was so worried. But I think the relationship aspect of it, I don't get, because there's human oversight. I don't know if even if I want to talk to an AI entity, I'm not just going to be like, no, I don't want any relationships with humans. I only want to talk to AI entities. Like, what do you think?
It'll improve the relationships. I mean, anybody listening to this, are you really on top of the relationships that you have with your candidates and clients right now? Or you're letting certain things slip because you just don't have enough hours in the day? If that will be the case for an awful lot of people out there who are running a recruitment company. It depends what people are experienced to. If your clients are getting like exceptional customer experience, then you can use AI to augment it. But if they're not, and you're leaving them by the wayside, and you're losing people because you know you're not interacting with them, and they're telling you that, then get AI to step in and start and do that job for you. If you're worried that it's going to be replacing your own job, then it depends what you're doing. If you're doing a very manual job, say sifting through CV after CV after CV, were you really employed to do that?
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to use AI, which is going to look at all those CVs. It'll highlight the best ones for you. You can then, through training or just through your own talent, pick the phone up and speak to those top applicants, because they're applying elsewhere. Do you want them to apply and get into your business before the competitors, or do you want to lose them because you're too busy trawling through CVs, which you literally do not need to do?
Absolutely.
So use it smartly. Use it to make you more productive, to move faster, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you put some wrong technology in, it doesn't work, rip it out and replace it with something else. And I think it will replace some jobs, but I think if anything, it's just going to make people more productive and allow you to focus on other things, which
like relationships, hopefully.
And being more productive.
Yeah, I agree. I think like technology, CRM, you know, how CRM has evolved and will continue to evolve and hopefully become become a central source for your business operations, giving you a view of customer 360, like all touch points, without you having to dig deep and spend hours either in silos or just you as an individual to create a report or a campaign. The fact that all of that will be automated, but also all of that will be consolidated based on large volumes of data. Your insights will be available for you to then build better relationships, to build more, maybe start having more informative but also engaging conversations. Nobody wants to just start with, oh yeah, so tell me what you like, again and again. So like probably one example would be, if I represent a company and I've spoken to you as a client and I leave, you've already told me everything about you and I leave, and then another person comes in, has no idea of what's going on,
Start from
asks
scratch.
you the same questions. It is irritating and a waste of time for everyone involved. And of course, like, it does not make you come across as competent. A client will be like, your own operations are not in order. The fact that I have had to restart the whole conversation from point A. So yeah, I'm hoping that people watching this, listening to this, take AI in their stride and, use it to just build better relationships and do more with their CRM.
They'll need to.
They will need to, exactly. Neil has spoken. They will need to. There is no other way. All right. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you.